Howdy, folks. My name's Cary Nightingale, and you're watching Cherrypicked. It's the show where we bounce around some free samples of an album and see if we can't find which song might be the most appealing. Let's top this Sunday. For today's episode, it being Valentine's Day, I thought it might be appropriate to explore an album that's got love in the title. And I was thinking A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. It's a jazz album that I hadn't heard before, so I looked it up. There were two problems, though. One, it's 4 tracks long, and each track is very long, much longer than the average pop song. So trying to cherry pick one track out of those 4 probably wouldn't be doing it very much justice. The second problem was when I tried listening to the samples on Amazon, it wasn't working. So instead, I just listened to the whole album on YouTube, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was about 33 minutes well spent. I recommend you go listen to it as well. So instead, I went with a different Love Supreme. This one is Love Supreme by the band Love Supreme. Now, my research department informs me that this is a French band that sings in English. The singer's got a very unique vocal style or voice. And just taking a look at that album cover, that is pure art. That's kind of like Andy Warhol on LSD. You've got the galaxy in there. I think that might be the Milky Way. And then you've got a half-eaten banana. So you can call me Snack Appraiser from now on. But we've got 8 tracks on the record. Average track length about 3.5 to 4 minutes. So this is a more appropriate thing, maybe for Valentine's Day, but definitely to be cherry-picked from. So let's go ahead and bounce right into Crack, track 1.
Embrace the last wind before the blue.
All right, so I think that's the unique voice that my research department informed me of. It's very Tom Waitsy, maybe a little bit Leonard Cohen-y, but less resonant at the low end than Cohen. Let's kind of skip ahead a little bit. It sounds fair trade organic right now with the electric piano and just the vocals.
We look like magpies spinning out and smiles back.
Okay, so there's something about it now that really reminds me, I think it might be that piano cadence that was just played. That in tandem with the voice, it's very Randy Newman-esque. That said, it's difficult to make out exactly what the lyrics are. That happens sometimes with a really deep voice. It's the same reason why bass guitar seldom gets to take a solo. You can play a bass guitar melodically, but you kind of have to go up the register a little bit. At the low end, those low notes with their very slow frequencies tends to get a little bit muddy. And I think that might be what's happening with our singer's voice here. Let's move on to track 2, which is Lonely Feelings. Now, I have been informed that this song was used in the trailer for, I think it was season 5 of Black Mirror. Take from that what you will. But let's see if it's any more addictive than track 1 was.
Lonely feelings.
Okay, so we've got some interesting sort of vocal effects going on. I wouldn't call it vocal processing, because I think I can hear the pure vocal tone, but it's just got a ton of reverb and probably like a panning effect on it. Let's see what else we've got in this one. I'm just going to skip a little ahead. Lonely Feelings, as far as a hook goes, maybe because I'm unfeeling, that's not the most appealing thing to me, but let's see.
So it's just ineffable, mesmerizing.
Mesmerizing indeed would be an apt descriptor for this. We've got a really slow tempo. Down tempo might be a descriptor for this type of music. Trip hop, I'm also getting that kind of vibe based on the backing vocals, the way they're coming in, and also the drum machine that I've heard playing sort of throughout this. Let's listen to just the last couple of seconds of Lonely Feelings, and then we'll move on.
Peter colors only visible, closed eyes.
Okay, so let's move on to track 3, Knowledge Don't Know. We were all fooled. We all thought that knowledge would know, but it turns out it didn't.
Knowledge don't know.
Okay, so what we've got going on is an arpeggiation. And I'm guessing that is a synthesized string arpeggiator because the strings don't necessarily sound pure or purely authentic, and the arpeggiation sounds almost perfect. It's really hard to tell the difference between perfect and almost perfect when you're just listening fresh and listening at full speed, at least with my ears. But it does sound like a sequencer on a synthesizer. Let's kind of move ahead because that's really, that and the vocal, that's really all I was hearing. So now I've got some other synthesizer lines. Okay. We'll just skip ahead a little bit.
I don't know nothing no more.
That's an interesting sentiment, and I really like the way it's phrased. I don't know nothing no more. It's very colloquial. And that sort of familiar phrasing or colloquial phrasing is really useful in helping your listener, your audience, identify with you as a singer. So really like that. But let's move on to track 4, which is Ain't No Remedy.
Ruins of these fantasy.
Okay, so the dominant sounds there, aside from obviously the vocal, the percussion that we hear, sort of a low hiss in the background. It's very soft. That's most likely a very large ride cymbal and a snare drum, both being played with brushes. It's a common technique in jazz. And since I wanted to listen to a Coltrane album, jazz was what I wanted, and jazz is what I'm getting. It's a very appreciable sound. We've also got some very twinkly keys, so it makes for a sort of a lounge feeling to it, doesn't it? But let's listen on.
Please smile at me.
Wow. Okay, so really building up to a crescendo there. That's sort of a mood modulation event. It happens very suddenly. We go from something that's very soft, very slow, and then build into something huge. And that sound is huge as he's singing there at the end of that clip was, oh Lord. So really interesting, really good sound. I don't mind having my mood modulated every once in a while, and that was the event we got. Well, let's listen to the last bit of Ain't No Remedies sample. Okay, interesting. That's an excellent melody, and I think I was hearing the melody being played by those saxophones that was very similar to the melody being sung a little bit earlier in the sample. So when you've got a catchy or memorable melody and you can duplicate it at different points using different timbres, use a voice for one, use a saxophone for another, play it on the guitar on another. That's a good way of reinforcing the melody and makes it even catchier to your audience. But let's move on to track 5, which is Beauty.
Love me or I'll hate you.
Okay, so two things that I want to talk about there. One is the very precise. This has got to be at 60 beats per minute because the the beat was falling on every second that was ticking by on the screen there. The other thing that's obvious as far as the sound goes is that very robotic vocal effect. Now, that's more vocal processing compared to the vocal effect of reverb that I mentioned earlier. This actually makes him sound like a robot. In fact, between you and me, there's nothing to prove that he's not actually a robot. This could be an artificial intelligence sung song. I don't know. No conspiracy theories here. We're just kidding along. Uh, but if you're going to put a heavily processed vocal effect on your record, doing it about halfway point is probably a good way of doing it. It helps to break some of that monotony. This is a very unique voice. We don't hear a lot of voices like this on the radio. And when listeners' ears are not accustomed to a sound, we have to break up the monotony a little bit. There's unique and there's interesting, but then there's off-putting as well, and that could be off-putting to some. But let's skip ahead and kind of listen to the end of the Beauty sample here.
There's something through the green.
So it's an interesting sound. I wouldn't necessarily call it as appealing as some of the others that we've heard. So let's move on to track 6. Now, it is HSRS. I looked it up because I was afraid I was going to say Ha Serious and have that be wrong. Turns out it's a cover of the song HSRS by the artist HSRS. Also French, but also singing in English. And apparently it stands for High Self Reset System. I don't know what the fuck that means either, but apparently it's about DNA. Let's listen.
For me to be someone else's wings.
It's an interesting sentiment, for me to be someone else's wings. I like that as far as lyrics go, but it does sound like we're back to that sort of piano and vocal only fair trade organic sound. Let's skip ahead a little bit and see if we get anything bigger.
Ocean sands, no added sugar.
Okay, doesn't sound like it. We'll just listen to a little bit more, see if we get that bigger sort of pop sound, see if it changes dynamic like we've gotten in some of the previous tracks.
Wish me the best.
And it doesn't sound like we do get that big dynamic shift or that mood modulation event from HSRS. So let's move on to track 7, which is From These Restless Hours.
A zebra living in a poppy flower. The devil.
Okay, so I think this is the first time that I've heard a guitar on this record. It does sound like it's an acoustic guitar, probably steel string, a little bit like the one up to my left, but it is being strummed along. It sounds fairly basic so far in just the first few seconds that we've heard, but then we've got some more interesting production elements and sound effects coming in, I've heard, especially in the right ear so far. But let's sort of skip ahead a little bit. And let's see what else we get from These Restless Hours. Okay, so it sort of sounds like we've got a string section building on the left side and then a brass section or maybe horns, brass and woodwinds on the right, but it's building up. So this could be another mood modulation event, but less stark. This is definitely more gradual than what we heard earlier in Ain't No Remedy especially. But let's continue on a little bit. Let's see if it's built up by this point. That's an excellent arrangement, the way that those string and horn instruments were arranged, what they're playing at different points. We get a little counter melody in there. It's nice, and it's sort of unusual to get a bigger pop sound toward the end of a record in the last track or two. I think most of the albums that we've tried to cherry pick from tend to put the slower, more down-tempo ballads at the end, and the bigger, higher energy tracks toward the beginning and middle of the albums. So it's an interesting take, just an observation. Let's move on to track 8, the album closer, Sun.
The rose is dead, the fire feeds the field.
Okay, so we've got instead an even faster tempo and even bigger sound, or louder at least, sound going on. So this is probably the more pop ambitious track off of this record. Let's continue ahead a little bit.
Bye, 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 my name.
Okay. It's not letting go of that faster tempo, of the bigger sound. So let's skip ahead and listen to the last bit of Sun.
I let it go. I let it go again.
Something of note, we've got that very rapid but quickly decaying percussion sound. It's reminiscent, I've heard it earlier on this album as an effect, earlier in the samples. Closest thing I can approximate it to is the sound of a diving board with that sort of rapid oscillation and then decay. So if you're a swimmer, you might enjoy that sound effect. But those have been the 8 tracks of Love Supreme by Love Supreme. It's time for me to take a short break, figure out which one I'm going to cherry pick, listen to it, give it a score, and I'll come back and let you know. So you've got about 25 seconds of intermission time to try and guess which track I'm going to cherry pick, and then type it down in the comments below. I'll be right back. Howdy folks, and welcome back. The track from Love Supreme by Love Supreme that I cherry picked was track 4, Ain't No Remedy. I rated it at an 8.2 out of 10 on the TuneScore scale. Highlights for me, we've got a unique voice, especially for the current pop landscape. So we've got the unique voice singing a really excellent melody, and that melody is top tier. It's catchy, it's memorable, and it's used not just by the vocal but also by the saxophones and the keys, the supporting instrumentation. I also really love the mood modulation events. It take it from this slow, smoky jazz lounge ballad, and then it explodes into this supernova that really fits not just the name Love Supreme, but the concept of it. I think it's an excellent production choice. There are other things going on in the production and the arrangement, like birds tweeting, things like that. It really helps to reinforce the idea, that concept. If there's a low light for me, though, there is a lyrical device that's used a couple of times. I think the phrase is, I'm giving birth to my soul. It's about giving birth to one's soul, which maybe I'm just not spiritual enough to really understand that as a reference or a concept. It's just not for me. But I don't find it off-putting enough that I wouldn't want to listen to this again. So I'm going to go ahead and buy this one. It's my cherry pick, and hopefully you enjoy it as well. But I've had a lot of fun today, and I really hope that you did too. I want to wish you a happy Valentine's Day. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay sound.